If you have your Bibles, we're in Psalm 2. As we go through Lent season, what we're doing is we're just going to work. We're not going to go through all the Psalms. We'd be here for 20 years, I think. But we're in Psalm 2. So we may not go through all of them, but we're going to go through the more important ones that I think are like point us to Jesus. And so remember, Lent is a season. It's a time where we as a church are going to join in the larger church network around the world that have been going on for centuries of saying, hey, we're going to take a moment, we're going to give something up in order to prepare and anticipate what Jesus is going to do during Holy Week. Someone's phone, you might want to answer it. So as we work through this, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a moment and we're going to pause. We're going to say, okay, God, what do you have in store for us? So let's read this. Now, I'm going to read it and I'll get into my nerdy stuff that I found out and whatever. So, why do the nations rage? Why do the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up. The rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed one, saying, let us break the chains off and throw off their shackles or their ropes. Maybe your translation says fetters. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs or mocks at them. He rebukes them in his anger, and he terrifies them with his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. I will proclaim the Lord's decree, he said. To me, you are my son. Today I have become your father. Ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will break the rod of with iron. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise, be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and celebrate his rule with trembling. Kiss his son, or he will be angry, and your way will lead to destruction, for his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are those who take refuge in him. All right, so here's what I found out. Now, this may be fascinating to me and not you. I don't care. I have the mic. You don't. So, the early Jewish people, they did not know Psalm 2 as Psalm 2. They knew Psalm as the opening line of the psalm. So they would, if you wanted to have a conversation about this psalm before the numbering system got put into place by the Christians as they were canonizing the Bible, canonizing, not cannibalizing. So that's weird. So they would say, hey, if you want to have a conversation about this psalm, they would say, why do the nations rage? Let's have that conversation. And you would go, oh yeah, because they had a memory bank. They were memorizing all of this. Now, the author of the Psalms did not write Psalm 1, Psalm 2, Psalm 3. They wrote all these random psalms together, like throughout the whole history. You have Psalms of Moses, you have Psalms of David, you have Psalms of other people that are in there. And then in exile, the Jewish people were like, hey, we have nothing else to do because we're in exile. Let's do something. So you know what they did? They put together the Old Testament. So they start piecing together the Psalms. Keep that in mind, all right? So here's that one. Told you it was important to me, but maybe not to you. But as we read Psalm 2, we have to ask ourselves, like, who's raging? Why are they raging? What are they raging against? Social location matters. The by whom, the for whom, and the to whom, right? So they are raging. It's the industrial war complex. We're going to throw a graphic up here in a little bit. It's very comical. It's very complicated as well. It's the war industrial complex that you see, maybe. It's a graphic of people with army stuff. There you go. So, this is the war industrial complex. It has not ended, has it? We just keep progressing, we progress. We're going to recycle this all over again. And this is what is raging against the God on the throne, right? The reality of it is in the ancient world wartime, you have the Egyptian Empire, then you have the Assyrian Empire, then the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire. You have some other random ones in there, but then you have the Greeks and the empires, the Romans, sorry. Now, there's some discussion about when Psalm 2, or when the nations rage psalm, when this was written. Either way, what they do say is it's either happening, it's written down when the inauguration of David happened, and they're like, oh, he's the king, the anointed king, or it's a way that the nation of Israel was remembering David's inauguration when they're going into exile. So the central event is David's inauguration. And you may think, okay, well, that's cool, but didn't David die? Didn't Solomon die, right? But then you also have the Davidic covenant, where there will always be somebody from his lineage on the throne. And that's what they're kind of back, like they're remembering, right? We were talking earlier in the huddle, team huddle, about like it's easier to see things in rearview mirror. So as they're going into exile, they're remembering how faithful God was at one point for them. And that this time out, what we call the exile, may not be forever. Because they're remembering, hey, there's an anointed king on the throne. And this Persian, this Babylonian, this Assyrian empire, not the end of the world. So the nations are going to rage, they're going to plot, they're going to conspire. Or they're going to like think about it, right? And who are they conspiring against? The industrial war complex, the nations and all that, are going to conspire against God himself. Why? Because they want to benefit themselves. They just want to continually cycle out all this war over and over again for themselves. So, and they're conspiring against God and his anointed one. Verse 3. Let's throw off the chains and the ropes of the fetters, right? Let's break the chains and keep the ropes off and all that. Why do the nations need to do this? Well, apparently God has them on a leash. Apparently God is saying, okay, you guys have this much leniency, do whatever you want to do within here, but if you go further, I'm going to put you on a leash. Now think about how bad it would be if God didn't have them on a leash. Right? We think it's bad now. But until you read Genesis and you read about Noah, and there's like every single thought and every single word was against God. Like the remnant is real, right? As followers of Jesus, the remnant preserves, it protects, it kind of keeps it contains the crap, if you will, of this world. And so this is part of our role as Christians, is remembering, okay, God, you're the one on the throne. You've gotten these nations on a leash. And if they go too far, we don't need to worry about it because you'll take care of it, right? So what's God's response to the plotting and the conspiring? He's laughing at them. We hate this image of God laughing at us, don't we? We like the idea of like, hey, we made a joke and God laughed with us. Like, haha. But he's laughing at you. He's laughing at the nations. Now, in his anger, he rebukes them. We don't like the idea of being laughed at, being mocked, and then being rebuked, do we? We love the idea that God is always going to accept us, and God is always going to be like, oh, there you are, little Timmy. I care about you so much, right? Until we've crossed that line, and now he mocks you. Have you ever crossed the line where God mocks you and laughs at you and rebukes you? Right? Like, we don't love the idea of that. Now, there's only a handful of times where God laughs at people, and it's always at his enemies. You see this in Psalm 2, you'll see this in Psalm 37, and you see this in Psalm 59, where God is laughing, actively laughing and mocking his enemies. Think about, like, here's God who's loving, he's holy, and all that, and he's like, go ahead and make your own little schemes. Right? The image here, the word image here is like this full-grown adult man arm wrestling a toddler. The toddler's going to put all his effort into it, right? And then there's a dad who's like, sure, kid. Right? Like that's the image here. That's the mental image that's going on here. We don't love the idea of God laughing at us, but this is really what's going on. Like, you think you have all this thing figured out. You think you're the most important thing on this earth. You think you actually have some level of control. Now, it's not that it's not real, right? But it's not ultimate. What we see here on this earth is a real effect. What we've seen in the last few months are real. But it is not ultimate. Let's keep it in check, right? So the nations, they want to raise up the war machines. They want the nations conquering other nations. They want to rape and pillage and conquering other people, conquering and killing people who are not like them. It's another version of us versus them, right? The nations act and live as if there's no real consequences. That they get to make up whatever they want to determine is true. All right? And we have to admit this. The victors write history. Right? We don't have a war story from the defeated side. Most of the part, we're like, hey, history's written by the victors. Get that and all there. And then we discover like these untold stories, right? The secret. It's not really secret. We just didn't publish it. But there's always this letter from the underground, or this like this thing that was considered secret, but not really secret. It's like this the way of the Minority Report type of a thing, right? So in the ancient world, what we have to consider, we have to remember this as well in the ancient theology of the worldview, was the deity and the power were connected to the dirt. It's a theological stance of animism, where if somebody was standing on the ground of that god, then they had some form of power. This is why in 2 Kings, when Naaman comes from Damascus to Israel seeking Elisha because he has leprosy, and he's like, hey, all I have to do is dunk in 7 times in the Jordan River. Well, that's pathetic because the Jordan River sucks. I have all these massive big rivers where I came from in Damascus. And Elisha's like, cool, do it or not, really don't care. So he does it eventually, and then he gets healed. And then notice what he says next. Hey, can I get 2 cartloads of your dirt? And Elisha's, yeah, sure, whatever. You know what I mean? So, so the reason he asked for that is because this worldview of the deity connected to the dirt of the land. So as these empires are conquering each other, thinking, man, like our God is so much powerful. It's conquering you on your territory. Your puny little gods, the regional gods, can't stand up to these massive empires. That's the worldview that's going on here. It's not just a political, it's not just a military type viewpoint. What it is a theological battle in their mindset. We would never think God versus God in wars, would we? We would never try to make a war holy war and justify it with scriptures. Or would we? I'll let you decide. So most kings in the ancient world also saw themselves as a deity, or at least a part of a deity. And so they thought, yep, I represent or I am the deity. You had Pharaoh who literally thought he was the god on the earth and type of thing. You have 2 Kings 18. You see the arrogance that comes across by the spokesperson of the Assyrian Empire. In 2 Kings chapter 18, as the Assyrians are literally kind of closing in on Jerusalem. And the spokesperson talks about it like, what are you relying on is basically what he comes out and says. And he's challenging Hezekiah, who's relying on the alliance that he has with Egypt. And what really Hezekiah should have been relying on was Yahweh. Right? And we would never think, oh yeah, I have a political alliance, so I'm cool, I'm good. Have you ever been in a fight and you're like, my older brother could easily win this fight for me? I remember getting into a fight one time in our neighborhood, and my older brother, who's 4 years older than me, he got into the fight, and the whole thing changed. And I talked to this kid from that point on with a whole different attitude. Because my older brother beat the crap out of him earlier, so he will do it all the time for him. That's kind of what, when you rely on a political alliance, you're like, yeah, my older brother will take care of this for me. You know what I mean? Like, deal with my light work. Even though by my own self, I would never have won that fight. Anyway, maybe I should learn how to get in fights again. Anyway, so you guys are all talking like I've never been in a fight before, right? Why not? Anyway, Chris, wrong things, right? So, in 2 Kings, we see this Assyrian spokesperson just continually talking, and he's challenging Hezekiah. What are you actually relying on? Look at all these guys that we've conquered. We've taken over this. This is the war machine. This is the industrial war complex. Different weaponry, different metals, different technology. And we think that's the impressive thing, right? We see today. We see that like we have our confidence, we have our strength that comes with a strong military. I don't know if Canada has that viewpoint, but Americans have that viewpoint, don't we? Right? So we continually do this, and think about this. How do the nations, throughout the history of humanity, how do they respond to Yahweh? When Moses confronts Pharaoh, Pharaoh's like, Yahweh who? Right? The nations would not recognize God's authority. The psalmist doesn't care. The psalmist doesn't even acknowledge that viewpoint, right? The Assyrians, they laugh according to 2 Kings chapter 18. Nebuchadnezzar makes a giant statue and says, everyone bow down and worship me because I am a God. And what happens to Nebuchadnezzar? God humbles him enough that he eats grass like a cow. There's only so much that he'll tolerate. That's the leash. Right? Eventually, like what we see is the Greeks will come in and the Seleucids, they're going to sacrifice pigs in the temple. And the Maccabees will raise up and kind of revolt against them. Rome, the Caesars will say, I am a god, so worship me as a god. And what happens to Rome? They implode, right? This poem reveals something in our own lives as well. Do we trust that God is actually in control? Because the reality of it is, these events are real. There are real people in Iran. There are real people in Israel. There are real people in Mexico. It's so easy to read a poem like this and be like foreign and be like, oh, those are out there. Right? Unless you know people who actually like have real connections and real realities of what's going on around us. The ICE containment centers, those are real human beings in there. The ICE agents are real humans. Do we want revenge or do we want restoration? We have to continually choose this. Which one do we actually want? What is the kingdom ethics that Jesus is going to continually press in on us? Right? And at the same time, do we actually trust that God is in control? Or do we actually want to just kind of grasp that false sense of security knowing that we can do nothing about it? But at least we saw YouTube videos and TikTok videos and we doom scrolled. CNN told us this, Fox told us that. We just continually go through the cycle, right? And so all of that's going on while God is on the throne and he's laughing at them. Do we actually trust that that's really what's going on in this world? God is not rattled. He's not scared. He's not like, oh my goodness, the nations are conspiring. They're going crazy. He's sitting on the throne and he's laughing at them. He's dismissive about it. So for you and I, we need to answer the question, or who or what are we giving our attention to? Are we giving our attention to the man sitting, to God's anointed on the throne, or are we giving our attention to the nations conspiring? Because the nations will continually conspire. We can either give all of our attention to that, or we give our attention to the man on the throne, to Jesus on the throne, right? You can't serve two masters. Either love one or hate the other, or vice versa, according to Jesus. And if you think you can prove Jesus wrong, please try. I'll let you deal with that when you get to eternity. So, right? But this is what Jesus tells us. Right? You think, like we talked about this, out of the overflow of your heart, your mouth will speak. So whatever you're putting into your heart, your mouth will speak, your actions will show, and all that. You know, a tree by its fruit, we talked about that last week. So your allegiance is either with Jesus or it's with some nationalistic other things on this earth. And I can't tell you where to put it. I can just tell you where you should put it. Right? You have to decide what you're going to do with that. So, let's talk about your week. Let's talk about your last few months. Where have you been putting your attention? Where have you been putting your effort and your mind, your mental capacities? Is it being put onto Jesus sitting on the throne and you're worshiping him as he sits on the throne, or is it somewhere else? Now, I'm not saying ignore the issues, right? Jesus will tell us, love our neighbor as ourselves. If you're in those immigration containment, the ICE containment centers, wouldn't you want somebody to care about that? Wouldn't you want somebody to care for and pray for you if you're in Iran or Israel right now? Wouldn't you want somebody to care for you if you're in Venezuela or Mexico or anything like that? Right? But at the same time, Jesus is like, hey, I'm sitting on the throne. That's who you should pay attention to. So we as Christians, we have to live in this tension of it's God, the kingdom of heaven is here, but it's not yet. And how do we actually live in that tension? What does that actually look like? The chaos of the industrial war complex is real, but it's not ultimate. God has an iron scepter. He's going to use it. He's going to shatter the nations like pieces of pottery. The question is one. Right? And he's patient because he doesn't want anyone to perish. That's what he's patient about. He's waiting for the church to kind of spread the kingdom of the news and the news of the kingdom and all that. So how will we use it? How all that? Verse 10, be wise and be warned. Right? Verse 11 tells us to serve the Lord. In the Christian Standard Version, it says reverential awe. The NIV says just with fear. So how are you serving the Lord? Are you just kind of like just going through the motions of it? Or do you have any awe to it? Is there any like, oh my goodness, I get to serve the Lord doing whatever it is. Opening the door for somebody, serving coffee, whatever it looks like. You know what I mean? And then verse 12, blessed are those who take refuge in him. In the Christian Standard Version, it says this, all who take refuge in him are happy. It should kind of trigger something from last week. Notice how Psalm 2 ends. Blessed. Ashrei Yishasher. That's the same thing. Remember, this is not written Psalm 1, Psalm 2. These are written all over the place, and the Jewish people in exile are like, oh, let's start pairing these together. Let's putting this in order. And the Jewish leaders who are putting this together are like, hey, Psalm 1 and Psalm 2 should go together. Ashrei Yishasher is how we started Psalm 1. Happy is the man who doesn't walk along the counsel of the wicked, doesn't stand in the pathway of sinners, doesn't sit in the seat of the mockers. And if you take refuge in that man, you should be happy as well. You should be blessed as well. These are the bookends. And the Jewish people, the leaders in the exile said, hey, these two things, these two psalms right here, these two poems, this is how you should enter the entire book of Psalms. You should be the blessed man who's not going to follow the path of the wicked and all that, but delight in the way of the Lord. Which, by the way, that person is Jesus, not you and I. And if you take refuge in him, you'll be blessed. So let's go through this and how they almost mirror each other, right? So, Ashrei Yishasher, that's the Hebrew phrase that gets put into, that starts Psalm 1 and it gets ending at Psalm 2. So, blessed is the man, and we are blessed if we take refuge in him. Psalm 1, verse 2 says, delights in the law of the Lord. In his law, he meditates day and night. Psalm 2 uses the same word, but it's the word Haggah, and you meditate on to their plots, their schemes. They're plotting against. It does prospers as well. And chapter 2, verse 1, part B, Haggah is in vain. He conspires, these nations conspire in vain. So all they're trying to do is destroy each other. Whatever the person in Psalm 1 does prospers. He says this, I've installed my king already. It's not what he will do, he's already done it. Do we actually trust it, right? It's already done. Psalm 1 is a psalm of the Torah. Psalm 2 is the kingly psalm. The author of Hebrews may remind us that Jesus is a better Moses and a better king. He's the true and better king and priest, right? So Jesus is that blessed man. We as humans can't emulate Psalm 1 by our own self. It's not like you can will yourself to do this. You need the power of the Holy Spirit to do this. You need to be like, here's the example from Jesus, and here's the empowerment from the Holy Spirit to even come close. Will you get it perfect? No. You know why? Because you're human. On this side of Jesus' second coming. So we don't get to be perfect, but we get to do our very best, right? We also see the blessed man's strategy and how he's like, man, this is real. The counsel of the wicked is real. The path of the sinners is real. The seed of the mockers is real, right? But if we actually get to resist by meditating on the law of the Lord and all that, that's the good way of doing it. So let me leave you with this. What are you going to do differently this week? Because if the psalm teaches us anything, we have a choice about the direction of our attention. Where are you going to delight? Where are you going to Haggah, in a sense? The nations are going to rage. They want your attention. The news cycle, they're just going to continually throw out all these things that give you fear and anxiety. And that's what you should probably recognize. Your news sources really just want you to be fearful and live in that cycle of anxiety. Chaos multiplies, but it also wants to steal your peace. Are you willing to give that up? And I'm not saying ignore everything, put your head in the sand, and just ignore what's going on around the world. But remember, it's real, but it's not ultimate, right? God is still on the throne. He's saying, take refuge in me, trust in me, right? So here's my challenge. Every time you feel the pull to check in on your news cycle, your notifications and all, by the way, just turn your news notifications off. What's the point? I would give it a set time of like this. I'm going to give the news this amount of time per week. You're not going to get any more hours in a week. Humans have been trying to do this forever. You're still going to get 168 hours in a week. Even in Women's History Month, by the way, women, you only get 168 hours in a week, even in March, right? So you'll never get any more time. So the question is, what are you going to spend your time doing? Do you want to take refuge in God? Or do you want to give in and plot into the scheming and the nation's plotting and hugging against God himself? And destruction, right? Because it will steal your joy from you. It will steal your peace. So every time you do that, just take a breath. And remember, God is not laughing at you or with you, but he's laughing at you every time you do it. Right? And he's actually laughing at the chaos who thinks it's going to win. That's the thing that's funny about this. Like, we think that we just like, all this chaos that gets stirred up. And God's like, yeah, you're not going to win. You're on a leash. You'll figure this out, right? So, those who take refuge in him will be blessed, will be happy. Not the ones who figured it all out, not the ones who stay informed 24/7, not the ones who know everything about the geographical warfare that's going on in the world, right? All who take refuge in Jesus will be blessed. And if that's you, it's available to you right now. You can find peace, even in the midst of all this chaos that we're living in. And by the way, it's new to us in this moment, but it's not new to humanity. This is not the first time we've seen world chaos around us. Let's pray. Jesus, thanks for this day. Thanks for who you are. Jesus, we celebrate the fact that you're sitting on the throne and you're not rattled by any of these last events of the last few weeks. That you are literally just kind of on the throne thinking, yep, I'm still in control. And yet it's still real for us. We still feel the pressure and the tension of this in reality. So God, I pray right now that we would turn our focus and our attention to you. And as we do that, God, I pray that you would just simply wash over us with your grace, with your holiness. And that you would rebuke the things that should be rebuked in us. We love you, God. It's in your name we pray this. Amen.